Right, so I guess I'm going to be showing you curves in Blender, the curve modifier, which is quite self-explanatory. It curves objects. So first, there is up here in the curve menu, there is 5 types of curves, and most of these really do the same thing. They just do it in a different way, change it a little bit, not much really. But today I'm just going to use a path curve, because that's the easiest, I think, the easiest to make the curve that you want. So if we add one of them, it just looks like a straight line for the moment. If you go into edit mode, you can change the curve. There's 5 points by default. For example, like if you move this point, you can clearly see the curve is changing. That's the final curve. Ignore this bit on the outside, that's just to like control the curve. If you go back into object mode, and as you can see I'm pressing tab at the bottom here to change from edit to object mode, you can see it's a curve overall. So if I move that up a bit more, make it a slightly more interesting curve, make it more 3D, you can see all the keys I'm using down here. G to move it. If I want to add any more points to the curve, I can press E to extrude and move it around anywhere. I can do this as many times as I want. So you can now see I have a fairly interesting curve. So there's 2 things this can be useful for, or rather 2 ways you can make a curve. Firstly, if I add a cube, either by Shift A or with the add menu at the top left, and add a cube, I'm going to put the cube roughly in the start, maybe make it a little bit smaller, make it roughly on the point. As that curve is going to be curving the cube, I best make it a bit longer, so press S to scale and X to make it longer that way. Then I can simply go to the modifiers tab up here. If you can't see it, then use the scroll wheel to find it. It's a little spanner thing. Add a curve modifier under deform and select the NURBS path, that is the curve you've just made. If I select that, it kind of looks a bit odd. So if I just move it now, it's going to kind of strangely move around it. That is because the curve modifier, the curve and the curve modifier can only move the points on the cube that there already are. At the moment, there's only 8 points, 8 vertices, so it can only move them. If we want it to actually curve, we need to add a lot more. So if we press Ctrl R on the edge, you'll see a pink line. Use the scroll wheel again to change the amount of these, or you can type a number, so I can either scroll up like that, or I can type 10 on the keyboard and just click and then right click. Then you can clearly see there is now a lot more vertices to be manipulated and deformed and used to deform the object. So go out of edit mode, you can now see it is deforming a bit better along the curve. So if you just move it along the axes, you can see it's curving around the curve that we first put there. Still looks a little bit bumpy, so we can also add another modifier called subdivision surface, which, okay, so it's kind of taken out the shape a little bit, but if you put it in, click simple instead of Catmull Clark and increase the views, apply it, just that one, don't apply the curve modifier yet, it will add a lot more vertices to it, as you can see there. So you have a nice curve there, and you could just stop there, you could just click apply, and you now have your shape. You can move it freely around, you can edit it, but you can't change the curve anymore. However, if I go back there, and if we still have the modifier, while it's here we can click back on the path and change points while the object is there. So if you do it wrong the first time, you haven't applied the modifier yet, you can change the points after you've added the modifier, like so. There is also another way that curves are quite useful, so let's go back to the start. Oh, my screen casting has gone. Right, there we go. Right, so if we add the curve, the same curve again, the path curve, change it, move it, change it a little bit, extrude it, make it looks a bit like a roller coaster. Like, right, so we can use another modifier with the curve modifier, called the array modifier. So if we add a cube and add an array, then you can see it gets a bit bigger, but it doesn't, it just doubles. So you can change the count here to how many more it makes. If you go into edit mode, you can still only see the first one, and if you say move a point, it will move on all of them. So if I go back a little bit and add a curve modifier, that's down there. Add the curve object, so it's moved back a little bit, and you should be able to see that you can move it along the axis and it will follow the path. However, this time if you increase the array count, then it will follow your curve. Now you may think that you could just stretch out like we did before with the cube. However, if you have like loads of objects together, then the array modifier is useful. For example, if I delete that, make a maybe just a little railway track kind of thing, so make it a lot smaller, stretch it out, maybe a little bit thinner, like in length, move it across a little bit, Control D, then Y to move it across, center it. No, wait, forget that. Okay, start that again. Let's make the one bit first. Oh, that's right. Put that in the middle. Go into edit mode and move it across. Stretch it out a little bit. And copy it to the other side while we're in edit mode, so when we go back to object mode, it's all one object. Now if we add the array modifier, then the curve modifier, apply the curve, increase the count, you can see it moves. You can make a track out of it like a roller coaster. And so, well, that's the basics of how to use the curve modifier. You can also add animated bits. For example, if we combine what we did the first time and what we have now, so you can assign more than one thing to a curve. So if we had a cube on top, make it maybe look like a cart, a bit smaller, a little bit thinner. Go into face mode. These are all the different types of modes. So face mode, edge mode, vertex mode. If you click the face, press I to inset, add an inset, and press I, move it in a little bit, select the center and press E to extrude, move it down a little bit so we have a basic sort of cart kind of object. Just place that on top. This probably won't be perfect, but it's just an idea to show you how you can combine them, and I'll show you how to animate it a little bit in a minute. So if I add the curve modifier and assign it to that path, it has moved back a little bit. So if we move it along, we can see it's following the tracks. So you could animate this along the curve as well. So if we press I to insert keyframe, make sure at the bottom it's at 0 at the very start. While you've got this selected, press I to insert a location keyframe. Move the little green bar up to maybe 100. Move that all the way to the end. There. You could also press G and then X, and it does the same job. And then press I and location keyframe again. So if you go through what you've just added, there is now a smooth transition up from point A to point B. Press the play button, you can watch it go along the tracks. So that is just an example of the curve modifier. Yeah, I did go through a few mistakes, but you know, that's what it is in the end. Thank you for listening, I guess.